I was looking at that book by Baudrillard this morning, Simulacra and Simulations, which I haven't looked at for several years. And the first essay in there, the Precession of the Simulacra, which sounds really hard, it isn't that hard really. It starts off talking about Borges, and I really like Borges. And I always find it useful when Borges is wheeled in. But it's talking about this short story, in one of Borges' short stories, in which this emperor wants the best map he can get of his empire, and he commissions this map. But in order to meet the demands that the emperor makes, the map eventually ends up as being 1-to-1 scale. It has to be the same size as the empire itself in order to capture the detail that's required. So the map totally covers the empire and touches it at every point and reproduces every detail at every point. So it's a perfect map. And what happens in that story is, as the empire fades and crumbles, so the map fades and becomes ragged around the edges and so on. And so by the end, the empire is ruins and desert, and there are just scraps, little fragments of this map blowing across the deserts of the empire. And what Baudrillard does with this short story is he says that the modern world has kind of reversed the order of that. That whereas in the past and in the Borges Empire there was some kind of authentic, real territory that was subsequently mapped, and in that particular case it was a bloody big map. He says that in a lot of cases in the modern world there is no authentic territory at all which precedes the map. The map comes first and the territory comes afterwards. He doesn't. Yeah, and Baudrillard doesn't use the word map extensively. He uses the word simulacra or copy. So the copy comes first. Just the simulation precedes the territory it's simulating. Hence, precession of the simulacra. And then he goes on to talk about other things in relation to that. But I'm trying to wrap my head around that idea again. I keep coming back to this because it's one of those ideas which I like. But then, I don't know, it just kind of slips away from my understanding. I don't really get it for some reason. So I'm just trying to revisit that to cement it into my failing brain a bit. I know when I've read about it being applied, this idea of the simulation, it's applied extensively in the film The Matrix, of course, and there's a concrete reference to the book by Baudrillard in the film The Matrix. When Neo is, quite at the beginning of the film, when Neo goes to his cupboard to give a piece of software out to somebody who knocks on his door, he gets that software from a hollowed out book, and that book is Simulacra and Simulations. And there's another reference to it later on which I'll try and refer back to. So I'm thinking of other examples, and the two examples I'm thinking of, and they're probably spurious, one is scientific and the other is religious. Certainly start off with the science one, a kind of traditional understanding of some scientific practices is that there's a kind of authentic phenomenon out there, apples falling from trees, planets spinning around suns, objects falling when you drop them. There's an authentic phenomenon out there which you can see. It's absolutely authentically real and it impacts the senses and is kind of indisputable and evidential. And then what you do is you undergo some kind of inductive or deductive or some kind of scientific process which produces a map of that phenomenon. We might not think of it as a map, we might think of it as a theory or a set of equations or something like that. But either way, there's the authentic phenomenon, there's the territory of knowledge that you're trying to investigate. You go in there, you investigate it, you explore it, and you produce a map of it, and that takes the form of, Newton's laws of motion or something like that. And that's fantastic, or it takes the form of a particular theory. But there are some scientific theories which don't work like that, or not so obviously work like that, and I suppose a classic example is quantum theory, which I know there's a lot of bollocks spoken about quantum theory. I'm probably adding to that bollocks right now, but never mind. In which you can't really point to anything in the world and say this is an example of quantum theory. It's not understandable in a kind of sensory, conceptual way, in an embodied way that Newton's laws are. conceptually comprehensible. As Feynman said, if you think you understand quantum theory, you don't understand quantum theory. It's queerer than we can suppose. It has all those kind of trappings around it. So in order to understand quantum theory in any way at all, you have to produce a map, even though you haven't got the territory to map. So you produce the equations, you can still do that, and those equations still do things. You can still make predictions, you can still find your way around the quantum world using those mapping equations, but they don't map onto the world, a kind of concrete world out there, in the same way that, for example, Newton's laws of motion seem to. And here I'm reminded again of Robert Anton Wilson's quotation, his version of the Copenhagen interpretation, that the equations of quantum mechanics don't describe the quantum world. They describe what systems of thought we need to create in order to be able to think of that world. Or they don't map an authentic and separately available, objectively available territory. They produce a map of what kinds of moves we need to make in our mind and in our culture in order to be able to talk about that world. So I think there is a sense, in which quantum theory reverses the order of mapping and precedes the territory to which it maps. So I think there's a kind of sense in which there's a precession of the simulacra in quantum theory. I think the other thing is in religion. I don't know what world religion maps, and spirituality and all that kind of mystical and metaphysical practice. I don't know what kind of world that maps. And if I'm honest, I think that nobody really knows. I think obviously there's been visionaries and there's been mystics since the year dot. And there's been mystical practices, meditation, contemplative practices of all kinds, prayer, chanting, spinning, all that kind of stuff. Lots of kind of things associated with that, but no one really knows what the territory is that you're mapping there, and there probably isn't a territory at all. Not in quite the same way that there's no territory that quantum physics maps, but conceptually in a kind of relationship, there's no territory out there. There is no heaven. There is no secret universe that we don't have access to. That spirituality that precedes our mapping of it, I don't think. But there are religions, and there are scriptures, and there are holy books, and there are theological accounts, and those things, I think, do form maps. Those are maps of territories. They are the maps which precede the territory. They allow us to make guesses about that territory, find our way around that territory, see how these distant bits of the territory connect up, see what the connection is between morality and identity and immortality and creation and cause. All these different things that religion seems to sweep up are all kind of mapped in those accounts. But as I said, they don't map in the way that Newton's laws of motion map, or the way that Borges' empire is mapped. There's no pre-existing territory which is painstakingly copied point for point. The map is produced first. I think that's all I've got to say on that. The only thing is about, just to return briefly to that thing about the end of the Borges story, in which the empire breaks down, and simultaneous with that is the map breaks down. At the end of that story, you still have the empire, and the land on which the empire stood is still there. It's deserts and it's ruins, but it's still there. And there are just fragments and shreds of this map blowing across that desert. It's that order is reversed in Baudrillard, in the precession of the simulation. So in the film The Matrix, the whole world, what they refer to as the Matrix, that whole map which gives us experience, is the world that we're born into in that world. And there are just little fragments blowing through that. There's moments when you come out of that world, moments that Neo and the rest of the characters step out of and into. So just little fragments of the real world, what Morpheus refers to as the desert of the real. So little fragments of reality blowing across this huge simulated map. So I think the same is probably true in religious terms. I think the map of religious practices is incredibly powerful and incredibly robust. It doesn't seem to be going anywhere. I hope it does, but it doesn't seem to be. The holy books aren't disappearing. Theologians aren't disappearing. Theology courses are still running in universities and seminaries. So the map is still absolutely there and is constantly being rebuilt. But I think the territory that it maps, the territory that it produces, is changing. I think for most of us, the map is fantastic and really interesting. But any kind of authenticity, any kind of real world that it refers to, the territory that it produces, are just scraps and fragments now.